Okay, guys, I think we got everything up and running. I thought it'd be fun. I had a little time today where we could just hang out and have as always, any of our streams here are wrestling chat. I guess that's a little redundant, but along with talking about whatever you want to talk about from the fallout of the weekend's events, you can go ahead and ask me anything at all. You know, whether it's personal stuff or stuff about um, my years in the business or just my take on things in the wrestling community. What do you want to talk about? That'll be a fun way to spend a little Sunday afternoon. And Isaiah is here first. Who is your favorite wrestler? Well, being an old fart as I am, it's Bruno Sammartino because I grew up just loving Bruno. And it was really cool because the old adage is never meet your heroes. But when I was fortunate enough that I got to meet Bruno, he was the kindest, greatest man I ever met. Just such an amazing dude. And I can't even begin to tell you how good that made me feel because, you know, you grow up idolizing someone and the last thing in the world you want is to have a memory of an actual interaction with that person being crappy. But I got to meet him. It was just not too long, a couple 3 years I think before he passed, and it was a really cool moment. As far as the more current crop of wrestlers, you know, at least since Bruno's era, it would probably be Undertaker. You know, Mark Calloway. I think Undertaker is the greatest gimmick I've ever seen in wrestling, and certainly I'm sorry, YouTube's giving me notifications here. Distract me a second. And certainly, he's one of the best workers I've ever seen. Between just in the ability to do everything. You know, there are some guys that the the physical is brilliant, like with the Undertaker. But not only that, the work on the mic and the psychology and just being able to make a match look good no matter who you're in there with. There's a few guys like that. Obviously, Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton. We were just talking about him in one of the YouTube shorts, but he's up there too. Randy Orton's a guy that could just do everything well. But yeah, Bruno was my hero from the time I was a little kid. When he lost the title to Koloff in '71, I was 9. And we lived in New York, but upstate New York, and my family, we didn't have any money. It's not like you could go down to the city and see wrestling matches because that happened in the garden. And I remember reading about it in the paper, and boy, did I cry. It was, that's all I'd known. Bruno won the title in '63. I was born in '61. So I only knew Bruno Sammartino as champion. And it was just unfathomable and just brutal to me that he had actually lost. And it was so cool when I did get to meet him all those years later, getting to talk to him about that night. And he was so genuine about that, too. Austin says thoughts on Cody Rhodes wanting to fight The Rock, and what about Hollywood Hulk Hogan? Um, well, Cody and The Rock angle is good. I mean, I think they did a great swerve from what they had initially planned. I believe in setting up Cody and Roman. But I don't know what you mean. You'd have to be more specific, Austin, about Hollywood Hulk Hogan. What specifically about him? Hi, Morgan. She says maybe if I become a wrestler, people could catch these hands and I wouldn't get in trouble. Yeah, well, let me tell you, Morgan. You know, professional wrestling has its own community for sure, and its very own specific set of guidelines for decorum and the way you conduct yourself and with certain amounts of respect. And there's been many times that I wished real life was more like the way we did things in wrestling. Many times. Stealing Fate says, how does it make you feel to watch or attend live wrestling being retired? It's funny you say that. For the longest time, I think I had stopped watching wrestling, and I didn't realize this myself at the time, but looking back, it's pretty obvious. I stopped watching a lot of wrestling simply because it was too hard to watch it, knowing that I couldn't do it anymore. Or I shouldn't even say that, because I'll make a video describing this exactly as far as my retirement. It's not even that I couldn't do it anymore. The situation I was in, I wouldn't allow myself to do it. It's not like I physically could not do it. But just knowing that it wasn't an option for me, it made it really tough to watch. And I thought when I officially retired, I've wrestled a few times since then for, big events and stuff. But I thought when I officially retired, excuse me, it would get easier as time went by, being away from the business and not being a part of it. It does not. To this day, it does not. It never gets easier. I watch wrestling and I still miss it. I mean, I get to watch other people performing in the ring, and just watching them, I can feel the ropes against my back as you run into them, and you can almost feel the bumps you took, and yeah. Jack says important info. I'm not drunk. I'm just visually challenged until tomorrow morning. I've often said, of course, you guys know I have the my Spaz Boys comedy channel. I've been on YouTube for a very long time. And I've always said that some of my favorite comments and posts over the years have been those that have been admittedly made while high and or drunk. Marshall says, do you think Phil Brooks should be given a second chance in WWE? Sure. I think, and it's not that I'm a fan, but listen, if you can put butts in seats, that's what the business is about. And nothing was done that was like so egregious that, to me anyway, that he should be banned forever. I don't have a problem with it. Yanni says, who do you think will win at WrestleMania 40, Roman or Cody? Good question. Uh, I, as I've told you guys before, I'm not a hater on Roman by any stretch. I love Roman Reigns. I think he's an amazing wrestler. And the one part of his game that was weak, obviously, we all know, was his mic work. And I think that's gotten very capable, if not even more so, more than that. But all that said, I'm just tired of him having the belt. I just want it to move on. I think it's better to me, for the storylines to have somebody else at top. So given that, I'm rooting for Cody. I think, and you asked me what I think would happen, and this is this is just barely in a scale of 100, by 51 to 49, I think Cody will win. But I could easily see it going another way. I don't think there's any way they put the strap on The Rock. I hope not. But yeah, my very slight inclination is that they'll give it to Cody. Hey, Chrome, good to see you. Hold on, let me mod you up over here. Good to see you. Marshall says, in your personal opinion, what do you think about Will Ospreay? I haven't seen a ton of him. What I've seen of his in-ring work has been really good. I can't give you any more of an opinion than that, because I don't really know much outside of the in-ring work I've seen. I don't know much about him as a person or even how he is on the mic or anything. The clips I've seen have all been in-ring. Excellent worker. Excellent worker. Now that I am getting more into wrestling once again, that's one of my goals, is to make time to see the wrestlers outside of the WWE scope. But yeah, what I saw of him in the ring was impressive. Johnny says, people are saying he needs to break Bruno's record, which is insane. Oh, that's crazy. Bruno went for just under 8 years. And it's just not the way the business is geared anymore. I think that would be terrible for business. I don't think they would even try it. And the thing of it is, we all see it on social media when it's discussed or in comment section of videos, whatever. I guess that's social media too. But the big difference is, through Roman's reign here, he's only defended the belt, what, 50 times or something like that? 50, 60 times? These guys defended it hundreds and hundreds of times. It's not the same thing. And it's not a knock against Roman. It's just the facts. It's not the same. Holding the belt for that long doesn't hold as much weight when you're wrestling that light a schedule. Isaiah says, for you, who should be Cody's first opponent as champion? Well, I've been really rooting. I'm a big Randy Orton fan too. So I've been really rooting for him to get one more run with a major title. But now with the way things unfolded yesterday, it looks like they're going to be building heat, or they built heat between Logan and Randy. So I don't, although unless they square that up at WrestleMania too, unless there's some sort of finality to that confrontation at WrestleMania, then I could see them pushing Randy on to wrestle Cody if he takes the belt. Kevin Aguilar says even Punk defended the title more in 1 year than Roman in 3. Yeah, and again, I don't go on about that too much. I'm always careful about that. I don't want to seem like I'm shitting on Roman. I don't like to dump on anybody. Anybody that's worked hard enough to get to that level in the business, I have nothing but respect for them. It's just that facts are facts. When you've defended the belt that few times, it's just not as impressive as what Bruno and Bob Backlund and Pedro and all those guys did. Hey, Demi, good to see you. Jedi Ghost says, I want to know your thoughts on Cody's current character. Some hate on it, but I, for one, love it. I think his character's good. Well, Cody's become a really good all-around wrestler. I think his character's good. He's not one of... And again, I say this not meaning to demean him. He's just not one of my personal favorites. Everybody's got the people they like and they root for and they mark out for. But I think his gimmick's excellent, and his character, his personality, I think, are excellent. He's a phenomenal worker. It's just they're just guys I like more. I want to, again, I said I wanted to see Orton get another run with the belt. I'm a big fan of Drew McIntyre. Him going over was just fine with me. I'm also a big fan of Kevin Owens. I don't know if they'll push him all the way to the top, but I like him. Hi, Dragon. My guess is Logan, Randy, and KO for the U.S. title at Mania. Looks like it's going that way, doesn't it? I had almost forgotten about that, Dragon. I had posted a short earlier talking about that whole feud, and somebody had mentioned there, and after I watched the whole thing with Logan and Randy, and boy, they did that well. It was like, okay, now this is where we're going. That's going to be the feud. But I had forgotten about KO's already involvement with Logan. So yeah, I think you're right. Those are, and you guys know, again, having the long history in YouTube I do, and knowing how Logan Paul conducted himself, I never liked the kid. Never liked him. But I absolutely cannot help but admit he's doing a phenomenal job in wrestling. Chrome says, Curtis, Jack wants to know why you've been teasing him for so long? Teasing him how? I need more details so I know, how to go about this. Marshall says, did you know WWE are stealing the Lone Wolf version of AJ Styles from TNA? I'm not sure what you mean, Marshall. Oh, you mean... I'm thinking you mean the way they're writing for AJ is it a direct ripoff of what he did in TNA? I don't know, so I assume that's what you mean. Mago says, hot take, a world champion should be judged on his ability to draw, not the amount of title defenses. I don't think that's necessarily a hot take. That's a fair take. And in total fairness, I was a big supporter of Brock Lesnar having the belt, even though he was part-time. But I wouldn't have been a big supporter of Brock Lesnar having the belt for long extended periods of time and not defending it on the regular. That's where my issue comes in. I'm just right. Roman's had it for me long enough, especially with the sparse title defenses. But no, it's all about drawing power, absolutely. And if they didn't have anybody else that I thought could draw like Roman can, I would say, okay, I get it. Even though he's not defending often, you got to keep him at the top. But I would disagree with that thought. I believe there are plenty of guys now who can draw really well at the top. Cody, the most obvious among them. Adian says, thoughts on Japanese wrestlers Great Muta and Mitsuharu Misawa. I didn't get to see as much of Misawa as I did Muta over the years, but Muta, they're both phenomenal workers. And Muta with the green mist, that I remember that from decades and decades ago, being amazed at what a cool gimmick that was. Yeah, excellent wrestlers. Jedi Ghost says, how do you feel about your retirement match? I recently went searching for it and found a few clips. That match was definitely elite. Yeah, it was actually, I will post about that to tell you guys all the details, because in wrestling, everything's a work. The interview you saw, the one I did, I think that was for a radio spot or a TV spot. I don't remember. It was in front of the cage there. I think that's what you're referring to. I had already officially retired. And as I said, even after my retirement, I came back to do big shows. That was a big show. And so, of course, you're working the indies. All the people at that show didn't know that I had officially retired while working for another organization some time prior. So you just do the retirement angle over again. But I'll tell you guys that whole story at some point. Raven Fighter says, yo, longtime fan of your awesome reaction content. Well, thank you. Any chance you'll be picking up on WWE 2K24 and playing it on stream? Tons of new features this year. 100%. I've been meaning to make another video with the WWE 2K23. If for no other reason, I'm just getting used to the mechanics of the game for 24 coming out. But definitely, I definitely want to do that. I love that game. And we'll have a fun time with it. I'll try and definitely do some on stream, as you said, so you guys can have input into what's going on. Pam Miller says, "Oh, sexy candy, sexy. Oh, that's a winning comment. How long were your wrestling matches? How long were your wrestling matches? Do you bleed well? Do you bleed well? Do you, Punk? I'm not sure what you mean. How long did I wrestle? See, in actual timeline, for over 30 years. But you have to remember. And again, I'll tell you guys this story in detail. But when I first tried out for the big time, it was with Joe Blanchard's group in San Antonio, Texas. I lived in New Mexico at the time, and I love Joe Blanchard. Always appreciate for what he sat me down and explained to me about the wrestling business. It was then that I decided I never wanted to even try for the big time, because Joe explained to me, you don't have a family. He said, you're making a choice. A wrestling career or your family, because you're on the road 300 days a year. And it wasn't the lack of money and, having to scrape to get by that really did it. It was that I was just too family oriented. So I decided I was just going to stay in the indies, and I would be happy entertaining as many people as I could in the independent promotions. And I never regretted that decision. But because of that, there are long gaps in my wrestling career, because you would go times where there was just it's not like today. There was just no independent wrestling going on. Today there's lots of indie groups. If I were still active today, I used to live in New York. I have all kinds of connections up there because, again, I wrestled there forever. But even down here in North Carolina, there's plenty of independent organizations I'm sure I could work for. But it wasn't like that. Between the 80s and when I retired in, the mid-20 teens, there were tons of downtime. Dead War says, what do you think of Ric Flair saying Shawn Michaels is the greatest of all time? I'm not a huge Shawn Michaels fan, but yeah, you can certainly make that case. There was, as I was talking earlier, there are a few guys that had just no weaknesses in their game. And Shawn was definitely one of them. Shawn was phenomenal in the ring, great on the mic, had that charisma, the personality, everything. And as I said, that goes as well for Undertaker, goes for Randy Orton, goes for Ric Flair. So Flair saying that, that's a fair assessment. Where's Thong said Cornette just recently called Logan one of his new favorite wrestlers. Crazy time, did he? Did he? That's again. I was going to be as tough as anybody to pull over into the side of the aisle that supports Logan, just because I didn't like the kid. But yeah, he's doing an absolutely phenomenal job. And again, I had mentioned this in that I had posted a short earlier, back in regards to the whole Logan and Orton thing. It's really telling that when they posted that short on WWE, when he throws that punch to Randy, they use the perfect view shot. They didn't shoot it from behind Orton. That means you delivered that punch perfectly. The punch was delivered so perfect, the WWE was confident, and they were 100% right, in showing you the striking point, which tells you, again, you nailed it perfectly. Dragon says, I've honestly never liked triple threats for titles unless they're elimination style. I prefer the champion be pinned to lose the title. I don't mind them depending on situation, Dragon. There's been some times where I didn't care for them. I guess for me, it all depends on how the story was building up to it. I've seen some times where they did triple threats for a title, and it seems like it was just a last second idea. It's like, oh, well, no, let's throw this guy in too, and I never like that. If it works perfectly for the story, I don't mind them. Jack says, I was hoping for harder promos on Logan when he first joined. I missed Cena. There, I said it. he's, you know, he he's been doing fantastic work, and as near as I can tell, and again, I think a lot of you guys read more of the insider stuff than do I, but it seems like he gets along well in the locker room and everything too, which surprises me. So I guess it's just you got to give credit where it's due type thing. Flippity Floppity Floop says, I love Gunther. He brought back legitimacy back to the IC title, which it desperately needed. Yeah, I was very slow coming around to Gunther. When he first came in WWE, I was like, nothing against his in-ring work. It was solid. It's just like, this guy seems kind of boring, though. But the more I've watched him, and especially recently, the more I've gotten into him. It's like, okay, I absolutely see what the bookers saw to give him this long title run. I get it. Don't Hug Me, I'm Squared says, question, the WWE likes to exaggerate the wrestlers' built heights and weights. Is that also the case for the indies? They do that with you as well? Oh, sure. Not so much for me, only because I didn't need to for my gimmick, but yeah, the indies do the same thing. But my gimmick, or, my way of approaching things was just my matches were violent, extremely violent. So towards that end, you didn't need to build me up as taller, certainly heavier or thinner than I actually was. But where it's, if you're a big guy, would they bill the guy who was 6'5" as 6'10"? Sure. And whatever it needed to help put over a gimmick or put over a character, sure, we would do that. Mine just didn't require it. Dragon says, I also don't like it when one guy disappears for a long stretch of the match. It takes me out of it. That I do agree with. In those triple threat matches, yeah, I do find that, you're right, I find that off-putting. It's like, because it's like you almost settle into a one-on-one match, and then that guy re-shows up, and it's like, oh shit, we got, I completely forgot what angle I was watching. That I agree with. Kevin says you make a good match with Paul Bearer. Austin says, I hate Roman Reigns because he's pissing me off with constantly winning. And what was your first match in your career, and who was your opponent? And thoughts on Tavish from back in the holy cow. I don't hate Reigns. I like Reigns. Who was my very first match? Well, like most or a lot of guys, at least in our wrestling schools, my first match was actually a battle royal. Because battle royals are a staple in the indies, or always were. I assume they still are. And when you first come out of wrestling school and you're first really green, that's where you get your feet wet. Isn't that terrible? I'm having trouble remembering who would have been the first guy wrestled in singles. It might have been Jackson Brody, who was the booker at the time in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He might have been first, but the first matches I had were battle royals. Uh, Dinuary says, "Have you ever seen CZW death matches? If so, who's your favorite CZW wrestler?" Just clips of them on YouTube. So I don't really have a favorite wrestler because I've just seen little bits and pieces. So I don't know a lot about CZW. Other than that, it's, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it's ultra hardcore. But other than that, I don't know much about it. Where's Thong says, Curtis, what was the most important piece of advice you got when you were training to be a wrestler? Good question. One of the things that always stuck with me was something that Joe Blanchard told me when I went over to San Antonio. And it's a phrase that's still commonly used in wrestling, especially when training people, is hit you very hard in safe places. And Joe Blanchard was big on that. He said, that's how you bring the reality into it. There's contact in this business. And when I make contact with you, I'm going to hit you hard, but it's going to be in a safe place. In other words, if you get a bruise, too bad. That's part of the business. But we're going to let people get involved. And especially when I broke in, wrestling was still kayfabe. So you're going to make people believe it's real because that punch, that forearm smash, whatever it is, that drop kick is going to be real. It's just I'm going to hit you in a place where you're going to get up and be able to go do what you have to do the next day. I'm not going to injure you, just might hurt a little. That was some really good advice. That, and of course, the things we're all advised on is locker room etiquette. What to do and what not to do as far as the respect in the business goes. Demi says, how do you feel about Mr. Kennedy? Anderson. I remember him. He was one of my favorites, especially when he went, Mr. Kennedy. That was cool. I liked that. He was a really solid wrestler, too. Very solid wrestler. Conversationosaurus Rex said, did you see Randy Orton likely injured his back at Elimination Chamber? Did he? It's funny you brought that up. I was going to ask you guys about that because I've been doing videos all day today. I haven't gotten to see any of the fallout from that. I thought he was just selling the back for the purpose of the match. I was concerned about his knee. What was it? He did a leapfrog or something. I just remember him landing, and you could see he landed awkwardly, and the knee hurt him. You could see he hurt his knee. He went right on with it, but that was more concerning because the back, I figured he was doing as part of the working the match, whereas there would be no reason to work hurting your knee as well. So I thought that might be real. Let's see. Jack says it might be a work though with Randy, unless you've heard more since. Yeah. I've been wanting to check into that because it looked like a work all along, except the knee. The knee was concerning. He's really good at selling. Yes. Hey, Mint Man says, do you remember the exact moment you found out about Owen's fall? Were you watching pay-per-view at the time? I was. And it was freaky. You didn't even know what was going. I had no idea what was going on at first and everything. It was that's just horrific, just terrible. And I've heard too. I've read that the truly unfortunate thing was if he would have released that just a couple seconds later, he'd have gotten hurt, but he would have lived. He would have just been busted up. But it was because he landed on the turnbuckles that he died. That's terrible. Dragon says, is it appropriate to call JD from the Judgment Day JD Funko? Good old JD. He's an interesting one too. And once the Judgment Day disbands, and they will have to obviously at some point, I wonder what they're going to do with JD. My name is not Earl. Says, do you watch any of AEW? I've watched a little bit recently. I'm trying to, as I was talking about earlier, I'm trying to expand my horizons a little, being back into wrestling again, watching it again, and see more of it. And I've watched a little over the last few weeks. Flippity floppity floop says, who do you think did the best pile driver? For me, it's Orndorff. He made it look like he killed people. Yeah, Orndorff was a good worker. Yeah, Orndorff's pile driver was really, really good. Of course, Undertaker's tombstone is basically a pile driver too, and that one was magnificent. Yeah, I'd have to think it over, but yeah, you're right. I'd have trouble coming up with anybody who did a pile driver that looked better than Orndorff's. Mr. Wonderful was a solid wrestler. Well, thanks, Teflon Don. He says, much love from Europe. Do I have a favorite finisher that I used? Or you mean just in the business? I already mentioned the tombstone. I always love that. I always like a good choke slam from a monster. One of the big guys. I know it's a simple move, but I think it's cool. What else is a great finisher? Whose finishers really are? As far as individual ones, because of the way he's able to deliver it and the imaginative things they've done with it, probably the RKO. Jacob says, would you say your guys like self? Well, yeah, your guys like self. Would you say guys like yourself, Lawler and Sting are too old to be wrestling, health notwithstanding? Do you think there's an age limit for in-ring? No, I don't think they should be an age limit. I think everything in life is a risk, and if a guy feels that he's still up to working in the ring, well, let him do it. Is the risk for injury more so as you get older? Sure. I mean, I go through that myself now. You just feel, well, it's not just a feel. I mean, we know that as you get older, muscles and tendons lose their pliability. They will snap instead of stretch a lot easier as you get older. And a lot of guys you get bone density issues, more often women, but guys can get bone density issues too as they get older. So sure, there's a lot more risk, but I don't think, I'm a big fan of everybody should be able to do what they want to do, make their own decisions for themselves. Sting retires tonight, AEW. Oh, is it tonight? He retires? My name is not Earl? Does he? I knew it was coming up. I didn't know when it was. Cool. Ric Flair's in his 80s and keep on going. Yeah, Flair's. I understand. The business is life to Ric Flair. I get that. But yeah, that last match he did there with shoot, the young kid he's been working with. I can't think of his name. But that looked pretty rough. That was a tough one. Rex says Owen's widow gives a really detailed description in her book of Owen's death. Ooh. Apparently following the fall, he sat in the corner, looked at ringside, and his eyes went dilated from internal bleed. Oh, man. Just such a horrible, horrible thing. Oh, it's next week? It's next week Sting retires? Okay. Yeah, like I said, I knew it was coming up. I didn't know when. Hey, Sonata, thank you. And it says, hey, Curtis, what are your thoughts on New Japan? Of course, New Japan's been around forever. And again, with trying to expand my horizons, I watched a little New Japan for the first time in ages, just a couple weeks ago. It was on, I don't even remember what channel carries it, but still looked good. New Japan always had great wrestling. Always had great wrestling. Japanese people have been wrestling fanatics forever. Mexico, too. Mexico's always, the luchadors, it's always been big there as well. But yeah, I'm a big fan of New Japan. I always have been. I love the Japanese and how much they love wrestling. I remember when the the Road Warriors first became a thing and they went over to Japan. A lot of parent groups there and stuff wanted them basically banned. They didn't want the Road Warriors wrestling in Japan anymore because they felt like they were teaching. We all know how respect is so huge in Japan, that culture and everything. And when you had these two guys come running down to the ring with that rock music playing, Iron Man playing in the background, and they would go in before the bell rang and start jumping opponents and pummeling them, and that's not what they wanted kids to see. That's how to conduct yourself. So, but yes, I have huge respect for the Japanese federations. Chrome says, I mean, you kind of destroyed your tendons during pensioners baseball. Was it baseball? Yeah, it was. What Chrome's talking about is I've also been a big baseball nut my whole life. A few years ago, I was playing in an over 55 baseball league, but that was my own fault because we were playing, and I don't know if you guys have ever torn a major tendon, but it's a different type of feeling. It's not just generic pain. You can feel the tear. You feel the rip. So I was playing left field. I was chasing the ball, hit down the line, and I felt the tendon tear. But you could also tell, I could tell because I've done it before, I didn't pull it off the bone. It tore within the tendon. So I'm like, screw it. I'm going to keep playing. I'm old. I don't care what happens. So I kept playing, and it was a game or two later. I hit a grounder with a runner on first, and I didn't want to get doubled up. So I decided I'm running as fast as my old fat ass and let me down the first baseline. And every stride, I could feel that tendon tearing more and more. And so I crossed first base, and as soon as I did, under full head of steam, I just intentionally tanked it. Just went into a front roll to get off my feet because I knew I was tearing it every time. My whole family was there because the game was local that night. And by the time I got back home, the whole back of my leg was just entirely black. So I don't have a lot of tendon left in that leg. Dragon says it's a shame that Goldberg is such a dangerous worker because he honestly seems like a solid guy in real life. He does, Dragon. And I read it was many years ago, but I read his book, and he seemed to have a healthy wherewithal about who he is, and yeah, everything about him seems like he's a decent dude. But yeah, he likes to claim otherwise, but the video evidence is there. He was a dangerous worker. Nitram says, did you see Hulk Hogan claim Paramount wanted to make him the next John Wayne, but he said no because he loved wrestling? No, I didn't see that, Nitram. I can't believe anybody would have continued that because, come on, we all saw Hulk Hogan's acting abilities. Holy crap. What was that first one he did? Oh, the one where the guy made Dookie and all the terrible writing, and Tiny Lister was in it. Oh, what was the name of that guy's? I mean, he was just so horrifically bad in that. Just awful. Shit, I can never remember the name of that. It's probably one of the few ways my brain is still working and intentionally blocking it. No Holds Barred. Nope, it was No Holds Barred. Thank you, Jordan. Yeah, Mr. Nanny was bad too, but No Holds Barred was the first one, and that was just, oh my God, he was so bad in that. So terrible. Jack's a true story. Hulk Hogan is actually Jesus, Moses, and Muhammad. True story. David said Hogan actually said he didn't do more movies because he refused the gay producers' advances. Believable, but probably not true. Yeah, I don't know what the deal is with Hogan, to be honest with you. It just seems like he comes up with more and more weird shit all the time. I don't know. It's just he's just gotten to the point where anything he says, I take it with a grain of salt, because so many times it just seems like I don't know if he's out of touch with reality or I don't know. I don't know what's going on with him. Oh, I didn't know this either. Chrome says I don't follow wrestling, but I saw Hogan as a born-again Christian. So any thoughts on Hogan, brother in Christ? I didn't know that. He's born again? I didn't know that. Or is that a work too? It just seems like a lot of things in Hogan's life are a work or a lie now. Yeah, my name is not Earl says Hogan in acting just doesn't go. It was bad. I mean, that No Holds Barred was one of the worst things I've ever seen. At this point, I think he believes his own bullshit. Dragon says, "I think you're right. I think you're right." And it's unfortunate. I mean, I was never a huge Hogan fan just because I thought his in-ring work was just boring. But he was a phenomenal character. He had great charisma, obviously, and a great showman. And I don't begrudge him any of the success he had at all. I wasn't a fan. I remember watching him beat Iron Sheik for the title, and Hogan had been working AWA prior to that, and I think he was down in before that he was in Georgia Championship, or I think. But anyway, I knew of him. But that was the first I really got to see him, not live, but see him working on TV. And he's wrestling Iron Sheik for the title. And I mean, Hogan was the big man at the time. He's a big dude and big muscle head and everything, impressive looking. And he gives Iron Sheik the big boot, and he goes for the leg drop. And I'm like, okay, this guy's building his momentum. Let's see what his finisher is going to be. And he gives him the leg drop, and he goes for the pin, and I'm waiting for Sheik to kick out, and it's like 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, no. You just brought in this big freaking musclehead monster, and his finisher's a leg drop? I'll never forget that because I was absolutely floored. It's like, how? You're not going to do anything with power? It's going to be a leg for real. And I was never into him ever since that. Brother E says, who do you say had a bigger impact in professional wrestling, Hogan or San Martino? Impact Hogan, because Hogan did bring San Martino was more beloved than any wrestler I've ever seen. You had to live that era to understand. I mean, he was just adored. But that was by people who were already wrestling fans. Hogan, I say, had a bigger impact because he brought people into the sport, into the business as fans that never would have prior. So he was more impactful, but nobody was anymore. I know it doesn't seem like it because it's so long ago it's detached, but people fanatically loved that man. Nitram says, if Billy Graham had a face run, do you think Hulkamania have been a thing? That's an interesting question, Nitram. I mean, Billy Graham had that good championship. Do you know that was the first wrestling autograph I ever got was Superstar Billy Graham? I wasn't there personally, but they came to Albany, New York to wrestle. And my ex-brother-in-law and I were very close. And he was a power lifter. He's the one who taught me how to lift weights. And so Graham and some of the wrestlers came into the gym where my brother-in-law used to work out. And my brother-in-law wasn't a big wrestling fan, but you knew who I believe he had the belt at the time, Graham. No, did he? No, I think it was before he had the belt. But in any event, he knew who Superstar Billy Graham was. So he just went up to him. He had a little 3x5 card or something. And he said, hey, he said, my brother-in-law, he says, just a kid. He's a huge fan. Would you mind? And Billy Graham, he said, it was really cool. And so he just wrote a star Billy Graham on it. And that was the first autograph I ever had. Jordan says, I heard Iron Sheik was offered money by the AWA to break Hogan's leg, but he refused and told Vince. Was that? I had heard about that. Was that Iron Sheik? I thought it was somebody else. But I'm not doubting you, Jordan. You could be right. I thought it was somebody else got that offer, but I'd heard something about that. No, I didn't hear that one, Dead War. He said, did you hear that Hogan faked a neck injury and said Undertaker hurt him to end Taker's push? Is that true? No, I've never heard that one before. I hadn't heard of that. Rex says, Hulk Hogan's biggest thing that pisses me off is the fact that at Macho Man's induction in the Hall of Fame, post Macho Man's death, Hogan said that they were best friends. Macho Man in reality. Yeah, that struck me as really odd too. I know that as time went on, Hogan and Andre started getting along better, but as far as I knew, Savage never liked Hogan. I thought maybe things had transpired that I just didn't know about. But I'm like you, that hit me as really strange too. That was true, Jack? That's messed up. But it's not surprising, unfortunately. Vegeta says, if you could choose any wrestler to win the WWE title that never did, who would you pick? I personally would pick William Regal. Could be from any... Oh, yeah. Regal could really work. I think the only reason Regal didn't was Regal never had a dynamic personality, though. He's a phenomenal wrestler. But none of his gimmicks were ever really, as I said, just that dynamic. If I had to pick right now, currently, Kevin Owens. Because they never, I would love to see Kevin get a run with the title. I think he's an excellent in-ring worker. I think his personality is brilliant, and it's gotten better and better. I think he's a funny guy. I would say KO. Jacob says Billy Jack Haynes killed his wife. Is that what happened with Billy Jack Haynes? I didn't know that, Jacob. Did he really? Wow. I remember Billy Jack Haynes. Oh, David says Billy Jack Haynes is Chris Benoit's idol. Ouch. Oh, man. Brother E says, yeah, Survivor Series 91, Undertaker beat Hogan for the WWF Championship, and Hogan told Taker he hurt his neck when Taker hit a tombstone on Hogan. Ric Flair was ringside and said Hogan's neck was secure. What kind of bitch move is that? I mean, seriously, you got to be a bitch to do that to somebody. Hogan should have, or not Hogan, Calloway should have slapped the dog shit out of him for that. It'd be well within his right to do so. We all know Hogan wasn't a fighter. I mean, Mark Calloway can really go. Hogan can't in real life. Oh, let me look at Chrome's link. She says, oh no, I'm being serious. He was baptized again in a do-rag. Oh, let me see. I'll be damned, you're right. I just, especially with what you guys are telling me, I was already the type that I was suspicious of anything Hulk Hogan says or does. But now after hearing that kind of pisses me off. You know what? I was going to make a video about it. I saw in one of these clip series we've been doing something where he was bad-mouthing Mick Foley. That immediately pissed me off because of the way he was going about it. But then I got thinking, now wait, maybe they worked a program at some point that I don't know about. Maybe that was a work. But if that's a shoot, then any respect I might have had for Hulk Hogan is gone. That was bullshit. He was going on and on something about while he was in the gym, Foley was out doing this and doing that. Well, what the hell does that have to do with professional wrestling? You think you can only be a professional wrestler if you are in the gym 7 hours a day and do juice? So I'm trying to figure out, if that was a work or a shoot when he said all that. David says, Hogan saying Harley Race set a WWF ring on fire for coming to Kansas City. Then he said Harley shook his hand and asked for a job with the company whose ring he apparently just burned. The only thing, though, you're talking Harley Race. That could have happened. that easily could have happened. Because setting anything on fire or shooting something sounds like Harley Race. So that could have been real. Harley was batshit. Absolutely batshit. Jacob says, yes, sadly, he sadly killed his wife. What he is calling a mercy killing. His wife was 85 and bad with dementia. Oh, that's sad. I didn't know all that about Billy Jack Haynes. That's too bad. That was a shoot from Hogan with Foley, Brother E? That wasn't a work? Fuck Hogan then. Actually, I try. Not that it matters. I mean, we're all adults here. I like that too. One thing that YouTube does give us really good information on is all of your stats, and we have like next to nobody in the 13 to 17 age category here because I try and clean things up a little because we all know I have a potty mouth. But all that said, regardless, fuck Hogan. He's got no right to say shit like that. Mick Foley drew fans in to see. They paid their money to see him. They wanted to see what he was doing, and were happy to spend their money to watch him do it. And that's the entire bottom line in wrestling. And Hulk Hogan should know that. But who the hell knows what he's spewing anymore? I don't even think he knows. Dragon says HBK overselling Hogan at SummerSlam 2005 was pretty funny. Unprofessional but funny. Yeah, you're probably right on both counts, but worth it. Yeah, I'm with you. It was probably a little unprofessional, but it was absolutely funny. Absolutely. Jacob says, "Oh, speaking of fire, have you seen the video of the idiot on the Indies who said it lit his foot on fire to perform a super kick, but the dork didn't have a plane to put it out and injured himself?" Oh, jeez. No, I haven't seen that one. Oh man. Uh, Mistress says, "I am clearly youngest here, old farts." Rex says, "Here's another thing about Hulk Hogan. Stone Cold turned down a match with Hogan because Hogan didn't want to put Stone Cold over. This was in the early 2000s. That doesn't surprise me at all. Hogan was notorious for things like that. And his ego, that wouldn't surprise me at any time that he wouldn't put somebody over. That doesn't surprise me at all." Richard says, "Being an indie wrestler, you ever hear of Nick Gage? For some reason, that sounds familiar, Richard, but my memory is so beat up, I could be misremembering. It sounds familiar, but I wouldn't be able to put a face to that name." Chrome says, "Now, I don't know which denomination Hogan is, but penitence is an element of most Christianity. If you want to test how true his faith is, ask him if any of this stuff and see if he's honest." Yeah. Yeah, I've long since started realizing you just don't pay a lot of attention to anything Hogan says or does. Brother E says, "After Hogan complained about Undertaker, the next pay-per-view, Taker had dropped the title back to Hogan. Taker had Hogan's head tucked nowhere near the mat when hitting the tombstone." You have to see a clip. Yeah, that's as big a bitch move as you can do in the business. Trying to tell management that somebody hurt you when they didn't. That's messed up. Well, and again, I guess we shouldn't be surprised. Mistress says, "I like one of the newer female wrestlers, Kairi Sane," I think was the name. Yeah, Kairi Sane's a really good worker. That women's division is freaking loaded. There's a lot of good workers in that women's division. They're a lot of fun to watch. Oh, really? That's very interesting, John. Says, "I trained with Harley in 2006. Didn't do anything with it, though." I never even got to meet Harley. I was at an event that he was at once, but didn't get a chance to meet him. I think he was there that day. All I can tell you for sure is I never got to meet him. Nitram says, "Egomaniac and pathological liar he may be, but Hogan did have one of the greatest matches I've ever seen live with The Rock at WrestleMania." Well, I mean, no matter what I think of somebody, boy, talking is hard. What I think of somebody, just like with Logan Paul, I'll give credit where it's due. Two of the worst wrestlers I had ever seen at the top of cards were Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, but their match together was excellent. So it's weird how every once in a while, even guys who just don't seem to be able to work can work a match. Brother E says, "You know who you would absolutely love in AEW? Eddie Kingston. I'm sure you know something about him." I do know a little bit about him, but kind of reminds me of Curtis Candy style. I'll have to watch more of him. Yeah, I've seen clips of him in the ring, and I like what I saw. Jacob says, "Do you prefer to work as a face or heel?" I get that question a lot, but to be honest with you, Jacob, it all depends on the story. For me, wrestling is all about the story. I love telling stories through wrestling. And so I can't really say I love one or the other more because it depended on how much I loved the story we were telling. I've told stories before about when the booker asked me to play, it was in Vermont, I think was that regular stop, and asked me to play the heel really hardcore, just viciously. And that was fun time to be a heel. He got nervous. He came to me, he says, "You can take it down a little." He says, "They're going to burn this fucking place down." I was like, "No, you told me play it over the top. That's what we're doing." Kevin says, "How bad was it when a fan hit you?" I've never had a punch thrown at me by a fan. I've had kids hit me and stuff, because you'll get obviously one of the best ways to get heat is you'll lean over the rail and talk shit to the kids and stuff. I've had them hit me, and that's funny. And if I talk shit with a fan and they give me a push, I'll laugh it off. I'm not gonna fight somebody over it. I'm certainly not gonna beat somebody up over it. Now if somebody swung on you, yeah, then it's on. But fortunately, I never had that happen. Oh, is that the time the kid wanted to beat you up? Oh, Chrome, I've had so many kids have. Again, when you're playing the heel, and you always have, parents always got their kids down at the front row. You'd always try and tweak the kids. They were fun. And then I remember the one kid hitting me one time. His mom yelling at him. It's like I couldn't break character. It's like you can't yell at him. He's at a wrestling show. That's what you do here. You hit the bad guy. That voice guy says I did ring announcing last night and was in a Battle Royal Rumble match. Oh, very cool. My hip is hurting. Uh-oh. Did you take a bad angle on a bump or something? Uh Surprised you didn't go to WWE. Gaming says I don't know if I would have made it there, but again, and I will tell you guys the story of it in full. But I never went for the big time. Family was just too important to me. Dragon says you should do a reaction to MJF's Savage Moments. His insults are the best. I've heard some of them. Yeah, that is a good idea to do a reaction to those, because I've heard some of them and they've been pretty good, pretty nasty. I like them. I liked what I heard. Well, I can tell you guys what I'm thinking about, and I haven't decided for sure if I'm going to do it. But I'm seriously thinking about making an actual series for this channel that would be almost like a documentary style series about getting in shape and wrestling one more match. And there's a real sound, not just because of the love of the sport, but there's something more to it that I would tell you guys throughout the story, and why I ended up retiring when I did, and why I feel like there's just something left that I would like to accomplish. And if I do that within the making of that series, I would tell you guys all these stories that relate right back to the things you're asking me. Kevin says, what was your worst crowd? Oh, Kevin, when you work the indies, the list of worst crowds is just, to pick out one would be impossible. Smallest crowd would have probably been, I don't know, probably 15, 20 people. Dana Prasad says, thanks for doing this. Can you share some storytelling I'm sorry, I couldn't read. Aphorisms you learned when wrestling? Like I say, the longer stories, I will tell you guys within the framework of that. It seems like that would work better than telling them as individual videos by themselves. I've started to map it all out, how I would tell the story if I decide to do it. The thing would be, if I went back for one more match, I would probably want to go back to New York and do it. Not that there aren't groups around here, but I'm still friends with all the people I worked with for all those years, and a lot of them are still in the business, either wrestling or promoting, but involved in it some way or another. And so it would probably require me to go back up there and do another match. But Chrome says, could be fun. Rebrand yourself as the Weeb Fighter. Can you do a Dempsey roll? Yeah, I can do a Dempsey roll. Would be fitting. You and he both have brain damage now. Mr. says, what could go wrong? Yeah. I think it would hurt. My body would be in pain. I think I'm very fortunate, and through all the injuries over the years, that's what I've learned, is that it's just like the size of my head. I told you guys, I have extreme, like almost mutant bone density, and that's helped me out a lot. I didn't realize it when I was wrestling, but and now I've shrunk too, which my doctor says is not unusual, A, as you get older, and B, says when you keep letting people drop you on your head, because I was 5'11" my whole life, and now I'm like 5'9.5", 5'10". My doctor was laughing at me because I questioned them about measuring me. I said, you're measuring things off. Because my measuring things not off, it goes, you shrunk. But anyway, what I was starting to say is, I've never even been 6 foot tall. I was 5'11", and with a shaved head, I have a size 8 hat. I can't go in. I don't even bother going into Lids anymore. I cannot buy a hat there. They don't stock them in my size. And even though the snapbacks, there's a lot of snapbacks I can't wear. I have to put them on the last snap, and it might fit. Jacob says, what is the worst reaction your wife had to return runs you've done and work more matches since retiring? One time I honored her wishes and didn't do it. It was shortly after I retired. I can't remember who it was, but a promoter. It was just outside of Boston. Booker up there contacted me. I just stopped working because of partially because of the issues and everything, and he had one of the ECW guys coming in. I forgot which one of them it was. It's terrible, my memory. I don't remember who it was, but it was one of the ECW guys, and he offered me really good pay. He said, "Hey, Curtis," he said, "the last show we're doing in this house, we want to blow it out." He says, "I've got whoever it was from ECW coming in." He says, "You come up here and work with him," he said, "and all bets are off." He said, "Do whatever you want, kill each other." He said, "I don't care what you do." He said, "I just want a gore fest." And I really wanted to do it, and my wife was really upset because it was when they just first started talking about the damage that had been done and everything, and so I acquiesced, and I didn't do that one. But she never liked me wrestling, which I understand. I never encouraged her to go to my matches because I knew what they were going to be like. Keep it up and you'll be ready for your Gimli cosplay, Chrome says. Vegeta says, as long as you feel you can do it and be relatively unscathed coming out, I say go for it. Just for the love of everything, don't take any chair shots. Well, a lot of places now, they're not even allowing you to take unprotected chair shots. But, yeah, I think I could. I think I could. I'm sure I'd be sore. But it's no different than, as I said, when I played baseball. Anything athletic is always a risk, and especially so when you're older. And I end up ripping my hamstring all up. So, sure, I could get hurt. I don't think they're going to take me out in a hearse, but Jack says you turned down cranial trauma. You should marry that girl. Cash, the real saint, says, Curtis, if you do another match, just don't be too extreme, like a lot of headshots, and just make it kind of quick, like 5-10 minutes. Well, I would tone that down. But if I go back to New York, you're not going to have a choice anyway, because I believe they don't allow you to take the headshots anymore. But there are other ways I can incorporate my style of match into things. But for me, it'd be more about the telling another story more than anything else, because that's what I loved about the business. Oh, but look at the clock. I gotta go, guys. Thank you for the stream. This was a lot of fun, and we'll do this on the regular. Now, anytime we have a stream, you're always welcome to ask me anything anyway. But as we go forward, we'll do more streams. Talking about specifically WrestleMania. We'll start doing these. Like, hopefully, I can do some day after a Raw that has a lot of things happen, or a SmackDown has a lot of big things happen, and we can talk about the angles and where we think everything's going. But this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys all hanging out in here with me, and appreciate all the questions and I learn a lot from you guys, because again, you guys have your fingers more on the pulse of the wrestling business. And just today, I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know. So it's a lot of fun for me as well from that regard. But thank you guys, and I will certainly talk to you again as soon as I can.